Hello, today we're welcoming to our program Dr. Serge King, who is a Hawaiian Kahuna healer, who's initiated by his father at the age of 14 into an esoteric order of Kahuna healers, and is executive director of the Aloha International. Dr. King has a PhD in psychology as well, and conducts workshops on shamanism, training shaman peacemakers and healers for work in urban areas. Welcome to the program, Dr. King.
Aloha. Welcome.
Tell us a little bit, will you, about how you got into Kahuna healing, starting really with your father, who was initiated apparently by his father.
Well, he was initiated actually by his Hawaiian father. He was adopted into a Hawaiian family about 1912 and trained in this Hawaiian tradition. And then much later, when I reached the age of 14, he initiated me into the tradition too.
And how did that initiation take place? Was it a long process?
The process of initiation, not like a formal ritual, it was a very simple ritual, but it was mainly my agreement or my acceptance of the path. Him asking me whether I would choose to follow this path after he described it to me. The hard work came after, because being initiated is one thing, but then learning the knowledge and being able to practice it, that's where the work is.
I see. It's a long process that begins with initiation.
That's right, exactly.
What does the term kahuna mean?
It really means expert or master of a given area of knowledge. So in old Hawaii, there were many different kinds of kahuna. There were kahuna fishermen, kahuna navigators, kahuna astrologers, astronomers, kahuna shipbuilders, as well as kahuna healers of various kinds, and kahuna priests. The priesthood was considered another craft, and so masters of that craft were called prayer masters, kahuna pule. My tradition was that of kupua, which means, a good translation is shaman. And so after enough period of time when I could demonstrate mastery, then I became acknowledged as a kahuna.
Now, although you devote your time fully to the practice now, you did go on to obtain a conventional PhD in psychology, and you did other work, didn't you?
That's true. The psychology degree I got, however, after having attained the kahuna status in shamanism.
Mm-hmm. And then you went to West Africa to work?
Yes, I worked with an organization called Catholic Relief Services, doing socioeconomic development work. And it allowed me to be in what we call the bush, in the jungle, in the outside of the towns quite a bit, where I was made contact with an African shaman, whose name was Mbala, and he served as my mentor for 7 years while I was in Africa.
Now, your training is in both Hawaiian and African shamanism then, and of course there's also Native American or American Indian shamanism. What are some of the similarities and differences between these forms?
Of course you have the cultural differences, how they go about doing things. Basic philosophical ideas are really the same. If anything, I'd say, particularly among the American Indian shamans, they follow what we would call the path of the warrior. And this is a path of shamanism. Now, shamanism is always dealing with healing. Mm-hmm. But in the warrior path, it is much more confrontive, is much more a sense of trying to control things, much more sense of emphasis placed on high personal power. And in the Hawaiian kind of shamanism in particular, it's based more on love and cooperation and communication with nature, rather than worrying about enemies and allies and things like that, which is a very warrior way. The Hawaiian way assumes cooperation, but it also assumes that in order to have that cooperation, you must know how to communicate with the various elements of nature.
You mentioned in one of your books that there are really three orders of kahunas. I think you refer to them as intellectual, intuitionists, and emotional.
Right.
How do you distinguish these?
Well, those are convenience terms that kind of give us their general approach to life. The emotionals, for instance, to use that term, this would be primarily the order of priesthoods. And these would be the ones involved very heavily with ritual, with energy healing in the sense of massage, for instance. They would deal a lot with emotions, and emotions in terms of healing, building up emotions and clearing them. They would become experts at organization, administration, politics, war, all those kinds of things. The intellectuals were more like technicians and scientists, as we would know today. These were the people who specialized in the arts of shipbuilding and agriculture and fishing and herbalism and those kinds of things. The intuitionists were more like the mystics and the shamans. They specialized in the powers of the mind and the power of the great mind, the greater mind that is in nature, but always working with exploring the mind and using the mind primarily as the source of healing. So in those three orders, they're not rigid categories. They blend over forms of massage, let's say, or forms of ritual. We're doing it from the intuitionist approach, which is that we're always coming from the approach that everything proceeds from thought, or everything comes from mind. But the overall approach, whether you're dealing with an outside world or whether you're dealing with an inside world, those are the main differences.
You mentioned that there's a good deal of interest in Hawaiian shamanism now, but there also seems to be a larger interest in shamanism generally, doesn't there?
Shamanism in general, yes, because it's so applicable to the needs of the world today. It is a way which is, it uses the mind, which is good, but it also has this intimate contact with nature. And with all the increasing concern for nature and concern for the earth, and a recognition that many ancient peoples have had an intimate relationship with the earth, why quite naturally shamanism then is becoming more well-known, more popular.
The Kahuna philosophy has 7 key points that you discuss in your books. What are those points?
Okay, well, running down them briefly, these 7 are the way I was taught, and they have Hawaiian word equivalents, but in English they come out like this. One is that the world is what you think it is, often described as you create your own reality, but how do you do that? This one says it. The world is what you think it is. It's an outpicturing of your beliefs and expectations. The second one is that there are no limits, and here's where we get that idea of everything being connected. Then there is the idea that energy flows where attention goes. Wherever you direct your attention, there is a flow of energy, and if you can sustain your attention, then you create effects or reality. And that's really how reality is generated, with a focus of attention. The fourth one is that now is the moment of power, right now, here, and that we don't have any power in the past, and the past has no power over us. That here is where we create, the same thing for the future. Here's where we change the past or change the future, right from this point.
Strictly in the here and now.
In the here and now. Then there is the very important one from the point of view of Hawaiian shamanism. The fifth principle is that to love is to be happy with. We call this the spirit of aloha, the power of love. And it means that you are loving to the degree that you are happy with someone or something. That to any degree there is judgment, there is separation. To whatever degree there is separation, there's not love. So real loving is deep connection. And this is a very powerful part of the island heritage. We have a sixth principle, which is that all power comes from within. And that means from the greater spirit within, not from the individual personality, which is an expression of that spirit. But the one spirit that we all share comes through each of us individually. And that's where your power is, and no one has power over you in your life. And then finally, effectiveness is the measure of truth. What this means from the shaman point of view is it practical? Does it work? The Hawaiian word for enlightenment is a good expression here, which is na'auau. And it really means gut knowledge. Meaning that if you can do it, if you can demonstrate it with your body, then you're enlightened. So it's a very practical form of knowledge.
Yes. I'm wondering, what kind of a role do gods and goddesses play in this tradition?
Describing gods and goddesses from the Hawaiian point of view is different from the Western point of view, and this has been greatly misunderstood from the first people who came over there to try and understand it. For the Hawaiians, the word that was translated is akua. And for the Hawaiians, the gods and goddesses are manifest in nature. So that even then, we're talking really about a term that means archetype or concept, not an external force that you have to appease. This is not the real Hawaiian concept. It got distorted in some of the later days, but the real Hawaiian concept is that the forces of nature themselves are expressions of great forces that are termed akua. But the beating of your heart would be akua. And the movement of your limbs would be akua. The ability to think would be akua. So from the Hawaiian point of view, these are simply concepts or archetypes, not external gods and goddesses. The rain is an akua, and sometimes in a traditional fashion it was given a name, as if it were a personality, so that you could communicate with it and understand it better. But it was never truly conceived as an external force.
You've brought with you today some statues which are visual representations of three gods. I'm wondering if you can tell us something about these.
Okay, with the understanding that when we're saying gods, from the Hawaiian point of view, we are talking about archetypes and concepts. And the particular one you're holding is called Ku. And Ku represents the body-mind. Sometimes we may call it the subconscious, but we must get that involvement with the body as well. So body-mind is a good idea. And you notice the short headdress, which a headdress always in Hawaiian carvings represents thought or ideas. Here it's very short because it represents the kind of thought which is memory. And it goes all the way down to the ground, representing immediate contact with the physical world. It has closed eyes, and those represent limited awareness. So it's an awareness limited to the present moment, to experience right now, and primarily physical.
Okay, and then
this one is Lono.
A little more dramatic.
Yes, right. This one is Lono. If we look in terms, to go back to Ku slightly, if we look in terms of what they were associated with, Ku was associated with power, with war, with many, many things having to do with just pure energy. Now Lono was associated with fertility, with abundance, with prosperity, and with peace. Lono represents the conscious mind, that part of our mind which makes decisions, creates beliefs, makes interpretations about life. Lono was also the kind of like the scientist in charge of agriculture and things like that. Here we see is a very tall headdress, and the tall headdress represents creative imagination, the creative ability of thought, which the conscious mind has. We can invent things that don't exist physically, which allows us to bring them into being or write good books, but basically it's that creative kind of thinking. It does not extend all the way down to the ground, showing that it's not directly related to the physical experience. So we can create things in our mind that never have happened or never could happen in this physical world. Now there's controversy about this, but actually there are no eyes. And having no eyes means that it is dependent for experience or awareness on something else. In this case, on the Ku for physical experience.
Okay. And then we have a third.
Yes, now in the Hawaiian concept, there were three main parts of the mind. The body mind, the conscious mind, and let's say the spiritual mind, or the higher self, which was called Kane, or Almakua. Generally speaking, that was not pictured in a carving, except on a very personal level. What you have here is Kanaloa, and Kanaloa in legend was the companion of Kane, known as the god of the sea, because the sea represents both the seen world and the unseen world. And the fruits of the unseen world, which are fish, are symbolically thoughts. Kanaloa, what you see, is a very tall headdress representing very creative thought, going all the way down to the ground, which represents full contact with the physical world, and the eyes wide open, representing the ability to see both the seen and the unseen world. Now there's straddling realities. Kanaloa becomes the ideal shaman, or the ideal human being, if you like, the unity, while in flesh, of all three.
Now, it seems obvious that there's very much of a relationship in the Hawaiian shamanistic approach between mind and body.
Oh yes, because there's always an interrelationship. Mind produces body and body influences mind, which then changes the body, which then influences the mind, which changes the body, and so there's this constant, it's never one way. And so a good shaman is always using both. So for instance, helping a person to change their idea with words, and then giving them, let's say, a physical ritual or a physical object to help influence the mind. Always to produce more harmony. When you produce harmony in the mind, the body is in harmony. When you produce harmony in the body, the mind is in harmony. And so you can approach it from either way. And usually a good healer will do both.
Now there's a strong aspect about psychic abilities in this tradition. You hold that everybody really has psychic abilities, don't you?
Well, of course. We would not even be here or we exist, really, unless we did. They are named in Hawaiian, but they're named as if we would name any other abilities. They are a very natural part, especially for the shamanic tradition, a very natural part of life. In any kind of communication like we're having here right now, there's at least 60% of this communication which is telepathic, which is partly why we can understand each other's words and concepts and smoothly go back and forth between them. It's not just the individual words. If you hear a tape recording of a conversation, it sounds very disjointed. That's because more of the communication is going on a subtle levels.
So there's natural psychic abilities, but then obviously some people develop them further.
Well, yes, that's right. Everybody can walk and run, and some people develop that more.
Now, in your healing work, what are some of the approaches that you take? One of the things that we've already indicated is that there are some different aspects to the healing approach, one of which would clearly be the notion that you involve the whole person.
Right.
Can you talk some about the approaches?
For the shaman, the healing approach involves the whole of whatever it is that's being healed. So we're talking about healing of mind, body, circumstances, environment. For the shaman, it's all the same process. And again, kind of like a continuum. There's not a difference between healing a person or healing a forest. But with that, two things are primary in this. One is the first question that the healer asks, which is, what is the goal? What is the intent here? Okay? Where are we going to? That clears away an awful lot of stuff, because immediately you're focusing on the change to be brought about. The second question is, what are the beliefs involved? In other words, what are the ideas that are sustaining the present condition? And how can we change those ideas to move us toward that goal that we want? And so with this done, and then the third question, and often this is done intuitively and trustingly of what comes up in the mind, but the third question is, now what are the most appropriate tools to make this happen? So with that, what tools from any system, from any source of techniques of any kind can be applied if they are appropriate to that person or condition which is being healed. So the mind is always involved. There's always a telepathic process going on. And again, I'm using that word to cover clairvoyance and all that kind of stuff, right? And then there's always something physical being done so we can get a feedback of how effective the change is. So that with one person, for instance, we might do some visual imagery. With another person, we might do some affirmations. With another person, there might be role-playing or massage to involve the physical sensations of the body more. With another person, there might be ritual. With some, it could be a combination. Shamanism is not a system of techniques, although there are techniques that are usually associated with it. It's a system, it's really a philosophy. a way of looking at the world. Those 7 principles that I mentioned are really rules about life, how life works. And like all philosophies, made up, but it's a very effective one.
Mm-hmm.
So when you apply that, it takes you into an altered state of consciousness in any given moment in which other things become possible. Rather than using, here's a little example if I may, of the 3 kinds of orders, and this is typical for different kinds of healers in the West as well. Let's say that we're giving tea as a healing device. Or not tea, but herbs. Well, one type of order using a very physical approach would you roll those herbs into a ball called popoli and do a massage. That would be like the emotional order, and use the leaves for that. The intellectual order might take that same herb, make it into a tea, and give it to a person because of the qualities of the herb. Knowing through experience that this herb is calming, this one is stimulating, so forth. The shaman is likely to take the herb, make it into a tea, as an example, and give it to the person saying, drink this is aki-aki grass. And it's because aki-aki means to strip away. When you drink it, it will strip away your illness. So very clearly, the herb is then being used as a placebo because of the symbolic meaning of its name.
Yes.
Physically reinforced.
It seemed to me that as you were talking, there are clearly some similarities between some of the things you talked about and ordinary psychological or psychotherapeutic practices.
Oh, yes.
But there are also some differences, and would the difference come down to that difference of worldview?
I think it does, because there's the assumption in shamanism of the connection between the healer and the healee. You are essentially working on yourself. There's an assumption about telepathic communication going on, being able to speak directly to that person's body-mind, bypassing their intellectual conscious mind. There's an assumption that it is not necessary to dig up the past, because the past didn't make you the way you are today. The way you think today is what makes you what you are today.
That would certainly be very different than from traditional Freudian practice.
Exactly. So while there's similarities, there are some great differences.
On the other hand, as opposed to the differences with Freudian practice, there would probably be greater similarities with Jungian practice, I would think.
And most particularly transpersonal psychology.
Transpersonal psychology,
Right.
as it's developed in more recent years, yes. Now, you're based on Kauai, and that strikes me as being a very special place.
Oh, it is a special place, yes. Yeah. In a number of reasons. First of all, it's the home of the family that adopted my father and myself. And so that's one thing about it. But also in Hawaiian tradition and Hawaiian thinking, Kauai is the most spiritual of all the islands. It's often called the place Kauai of strong prayers. It's the home of a race, primary home of a race of people called the Menehune, or the Mu. And tradition is that they came a very long time ago from the stars, from the Pleiades, and created a civilization on the continent of Mu. And that Kauai is still one of the remnants of that place. In the various places on the island, there's still a lot of ancient temple sites that were made by the Menehunes, and different places where we hold the celebrations that we have annually. There's one place called Kamokila Village, where we hold our annual Makahiki celebration. This is like a Hawaiian form of Thanksgiving, celebrated in November of every year.
And the celebration itself includes dance, I take it?
Oh yes, we always have the Hawaiian dance.
This group that we see moving in a circle here,
yes.
Is that one of those dances?
Yes, that's called Kalana Hula. And Kalana Hula is a combined form of an ancient Hawaiian martial art, as well as the more modern hula that is used as a kind of moving meditation. The word hula, in its roots, actually means to raise the light. And then we have music as well. The Hawaiians have a particular instrument called the nose flute. It looks like a regular bamboo flute, only it's played with the nose. Several reasons. It was used between lovers, because the old Hawaiians used to kiss by rubbing noses. Has a nice mellow tone.
Yes, yes. Now, we have also a picture where you seem to be doing a healing.
That's the ceremony. That's a ceremony of initiation of the Alakai. In the ceremony, we gather the people together and we do a blessing, 7 blessings actually, representing the 7 elements. And so they are blessed with the power of fire, water, wind, and stone, plants, animals, and humans. These are considered the 7 elements in the Hawaiian shaman tradition. Earth, which wasn't mentioned, is the whole thing. So each one of these are 7 elements of the earth. And they're blessed with a symbol of each one of these elements. So a leaf for plants, for instance, and a blowing of the breath for wind, and raising the head toward the sun for fire. And so then they make a vow to spread the spirit of aloha, and we make a vow, the organization makes a vow to support them in their work.
Now, your organization is called Aloha International.
Right.
And we've already established the notion of aloha, but tell us something about the organization itself.
Well, Aloha International, as the name implies, is organized to spread the spirit of aloha throughout the world. This is the spirit of love, teaching the power of love, and the practicality of it. And we do this in a number of ways. We have a worldwide network practicing and teaching this knowledge in the shamanic tradition of Hawaii. And we also have a number of projects that go along with it. We do workshops and train people in this knowledge so that they can start practicing it right in the urban environments. Shamans work with people a great deal.
And go where the people are.
Go where the people are, that's right. And then we also have as our center a Hawaiian Art Museum and bookstore, where we have a complete selection of books on Hawaiiana, and we feature art by artists and craftsmen of the islands.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, Serge, and glad to have had you with us.
Good.
Thank you very much for coming.
Mahalo.